Welcome back, folks. Lee Snyder here to preview the Tuesday EPL four-game slate on DraftKings. Super pumped for this week for a number of reasons. I just drank a lot of caffeine and took a cold shower. Cannot recommend that combination enough. But I'm also pumped because it's an awesome week for EPL. We have two slates, a slate on Tuesday, 4 games, and then a Wednesday slate that is probably going to be at least 4 games, but could be 5. We'll have to check that schedule again. But DK probably will not drop that until after the Tuesday slate is played out. Nonetheless, it's an awesome week for EPL DFS. Feels a lot like a Champions League week since we have 2 pretty good slates on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, so a lot to look forward to. Anyway, let's get into this Tuesday slate. So, just play Manchester City. It really could be that simple. That could be the end of the video. But I'm going to dive a little bit deeper for you guys. But honestly, that is not even sarcasm. The way things are priced and the way these matches lay out together, you could easily just stack City and be done with it. So that is going to be the chalky thing to do, no doubt. And just because it's chalky doesn't mean it's wrong. That is the optimal thing to do as well. Although in GPPs, it certainly could pay to buck that trend and be a little different with your lineup. But nonetheless, let's take a look at the 4 games that we have. It's a split kickoff, 2 early matches followed by 2 late matches. I'm in the Central Time Zone here in Austin, Texas. So I think these are, if you're on the East Coast, this is showing an hour earlier than your East Coast kickoffs. All right, anyway, so as far as the matches go, Crystal Palace is hosting West Ham. That's a 2.5 total, and it's essentially a pick'em. West Ham are a slight favorite right now. And then we have Newcastle hosting Leeds. That's a 3 total. Leeds are a minus 110 favorite, so the clear favorite in that match. Leeds are just an awesome team for DFS purposes, and Newcastle are a team that will tend to sit back, and Leeds just dominate possession against anybody, so I think there is actually a lot of reason to like Leeds in that match. The later matches, we have Southampton hosting Arsenal. Arsenal a slight favorite here, 2.5 total, but this is essentially a pick'em, and Southampton, much like Crystal Palace, are a really solid team and probably better than a lot of people realize. I'm not throwing Palace and Southampton in the same boat. Southampton are definitely the better team, but I think both of these teams are somewhat underrated in the Premier League. And really, if either of these teams have their day, Palace can beat West Ham, and Southampton, I would almost say I expect to beat Arsenal, although Arsenal has looked a bit better of late with some changes in the lineup. And then finally, the most important match on the slate is West Brom hosting Manchester City. This is a 3 total. Manchester City minus 550 favorites, so pretty significant there. And based on the implied odds here, or the implied totals here rather, Manchester City are projected to score 2.5 goals, which is by far the most on this slate. So if we're just looking at the odds, it's pretty clear that Manchester City are the team that we want to target here from a cash or optimal perspective. Now, when I saw these odds, I expected to pull up the salaries and see every City player priced at 9K or above, especially the forwards and the attacking midfielders at least, but that is nowhere near the case. It appears that I just can't follow the logic in the pricing here, to be honest. It seems that not only are City vastly underpriced compared to teams like West Ham and Arsenal, but overall the pricing is just quite soft on this slate, and you could really build a lineup however you want and play almost every single guy that you want to target. So it should be a fun slate, but it's not the most difficult. So really, anyone can pop in here and build a pretty strong lineup just by focusing on City. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the pricing. But before we do that, I thought this was super interesting. This is not like, maybe Manchester City didn't look like themselves earlier in the season, right? But this is now a team that has won 6 straight matches in the Premier League. They've scored 13 and allowed just 1. So not only is it Manchester City, but it's a Manchester City team that is honestly on fire right now. Looks like the strongest team in the EPL once again. And I think if you looked at the futures to win the league, Manchester City is probably the most highly favored now, even though they're currently second, but they have a game in hand. So they win this match against West Brom, which I fully expect they will be at the top of the Premier League once again. All right, so I alluded to pricing and how soft it is, so let's go ahead and take a look. So, no City forward priced over 8K, which is just ludicrous. And then as far as midfield goes, De Bruyne is out, but still, Foden at 8,800, Gundogan at 7,100. So you're really just getting a ton of value. I mean, even Cancelo, 5,300, completely reasonable, and the guys from West Ham are priced higher. So it just almost makes it too easy to fit in every City player you want, but that is the way I would go in an optimal or cash build. And I would even argue, so you have to play guys from 3 teams on DraftKings. I would even argue that you could play 7 City guys and then 1 guy from 2 more teams. And that could be your lineup of 9 right there. You could easily do that. And you have to keep in mind that City's in the late match, right? So we don't know who's going to start, but we know that KDB's out and we know that Aguero's out. So that really cuts down on the rotation we're going to see from City. And if you've got 6 or 7 roster spots open and one of them is the utility spot, you're going to be able to make it work no matter who starts. Even if 1 or 2 of the guys that you plan on playing, maybe Mahrez doesn't start, it's going to be fine because there's 4. You've got Sterling, Mahrez, Jesus, and Silva. 2 of those guys almost certainly start. In the midfield, I can almost guarantee you that Foden and Gundogan start. Rodrigo's probably in there too. In defense, Cancelo will almost certainly start, and then one of Walker or Zinchenko probably starts. I think Walker's dealing with an injury, so there's just a ton of flexibility there. So I'm really not worried about City being in the late match here. All right, I'll just, it's going to be super obvious to play City. They're going to be very, very chalky. So, yes, in a larger field, GPP, there are, or there is definitely some merit to mixing it up and, maybe taking a few pieces from another game that could blow up. So just in terms of what I think each game will look like, this West Ham Crystal Palace, like I said, I think Crystal Palace is a little bit better than people realize. The total is only 2.5. So on paper, I don't see a ton of goals there. And the problem is you really have to pay up for Bowen and Antonio. And it's tough to do when you could have the City guys for less. Same thing goes for defense. I'd rather have Cancelo over Cresswell or Kufal, although I wouldn't mind having one of these guys as a second defender. Crystal Palace will probably sit back and allow West Ham to cross the ball a lot, so I do think that benefits Cresswell and Kufal for sure. If City were priced way up like they should be, I don't even think it would be crazy to look at a guy like Townsend or Eze in there under 7K, but when I can have Gabby Jesus or Bernardo Silva or Gundogan, in the midfield position for just a little bit more, I don't see how you go to these guys from Crystal Palace who are really more floor plays than upside plays anyway. So that's that match. Now, Leeds, I think, is a very, very interesting team. They are very ball dominant. I think they have the most possession in the EPL. Even when they play teams that are better than them, they tend to dominate possession. It's just their aggressive style of play. And Newcastle is a team that likes to bunker down and doesn't hold a ton of possession. So I think you see a game here where Leeds just dominates and has a ton of possession, creates a ton of chances, crosses the ball a good amount. So that is attractive for DFS purposes. And, I don't think it would be crazy to sneak a guy like Rafinha in your lineup, or Jack Harrison, or even, Calvin Phillips, 4.4K. He could be one of those pieces from another team that's not City. So if I'm looking at a roster spot where it can't be a City player just by virtue of the numbers in my lineup, then Leeds is probably the next place I'm going to look, just because they are so productive for fantasy purposes. And I think so. Rafinha has been taking most of the set pieces, but just review the history, because Phillips could come in and take some. Harrison could have a role there, but I think Rafinha has still been the guy, and he's been a very solid fantasy player. That 7 points last time out was one of his worst performances of late, but usually he's ending up in double digits. So he's been very reliable. All right. I've already talked about City and West Brom. City's going to dominate that game, have a ton of the ball, create a ton of chances. Arsenal, Southampton. This should be a very tight game. I think either team could easily win here. 2.5 total. So not absolutely thrilled about either team here, especially when you consider the prices. Saka has been absolutely amazing. One of the best young talents in the EPL and the world. However, 9.4K. He's going to be the most expensive player on the slate easily with KDB out. Yeah, he's 600 more than Foden. So he's a great play, but in the context of this slate, I just don't think you need to pay that much for Saka. It just seems a little crazy. I'd much rather have Foden at 8.8K. James Ward-Prowse at 6.5 is a great price for him. You're going to get 10 points out of him. So, again, he's a guy that I wouldn't mind throwing in my cash lineup as one of my non-City pieces. In terms of defenders, don't really think I need to pay 5.7 for Tierney when I can have Cancelo. Bellerin at 3.9, not bad as one of your non-City pieces there. So I think you could take a piece from this game, but for me, it's probably not going to be Saka at that piece. Trying to think of anything else I haven't hit on. For City, with KDB out, that does open up set pieces. Foden had been essentially splitting with him already, so he probably maintains that role. And then I think you see Foden split set pieces with either Mahrez or Gundogan. So that's something to keep an eye on over there. And then finally, I'll just give you a peek at my top 3 projected players at each position. So you're going to see a lot of City. So midfield, we've got Foden, Harrison, and Gundogan. So it'll be interesting to see where Gundogan lines up. He's been playing really well lately. And with KDB out of the lineup, it's very likely that Gundogan gets a more attacking role, while a player like Rodri or Fernandinho kind of sits and plays as the holding midfielder. So 7.1K is a great price for Gundogan, given his form, and he also has the potential to have a role on set pieces. I have to go back and look at what his role has been the last couple matches in terms of set pieces. Not sure if he's taken any corners or not, but regardless, Gundogan's a great play. Foden, who I already mentioned, he basically, I think with KDB out, you're going to see Foden be the primary attacking force for City. He's going to have a ton of the ball. The attack's probably going to come down his side. I don't think it really matters, honestly, whether he's looked really good out on the left wing, but he could tuck into the right midfield position with KDB out. And I might like him a little less there, but regardless, I want Foden, and I think Gundogan probably plays in that KDB role anyway. So hopefully we see Foden out on that left flank with Mahrez on the right flank. And then maybe Sterling through the middle, or if Jesus is through the middle, that would push Sterling out to the left and move Foden somewhere else. But anyway, I'm honestly diving too deep into any of that. You just want to play a bunch of City, and Foden's one of the top guys that you want to play from City. But as I mentioned, right in the middle of them is Jack Harrison, who has a great projection. And while Jack Harrison's scoring odds are not going to be as high as Foden or Gundogan, he is going to have a great floor just because Leeds are going to dominate Newcastle, and Harrison will probably cross a ton. All right, so at the forward position, two more City guys, Mahrez and Sterling. And then again, sandwiching a guy from Leeds who I mentioned, Rafinha. So Rafinha actually projects to have a higher floor than Sterling or Mahrez, and that's something to consider in terms of a cash build. The reason for that is, although Mahrez does have a role in set pieces as well, sometimes Pep will pull him off after like 70 minutes. So I think Rafinha is just a tad safer, although he is subject to an early sub as well. I mean, all things considered, especially if we're looking at price, Mahrez is the more valuable play. You might have a more interesting question between Rafinha and Sterling, because Sterling is capable of a somewhat lower floor game, even in a good matchup. And I would also caution you that I think a lot of that depends on where Sterling plays. If he lines up centrally as kind of that false nine, his floor is going to be a bit lower. If he's out on the left wing, that should give him more chances to create opportunities. The thing is, you're going to have to decide to play Rafinha over Sterling before you know where Sterling is playing, because he's in the late match. So those are just kind of the factors that I would consider there. And then finally at defender, Cancelo, clear and away the best defender play. In a game where City dominates West Brom, you're going to see Cancelo, you're not even going to realize he's a defender. He's going to be playing so high up the field that it's going to, he's effectively just another attacker for City. So 5.3K, he's probably the easiest play on the entire slate for me. Pep has been starting him every game. I suppose there's some risk he's not in, but I'm willing to put Cancelo in at the risk of having to play Mendy or Kyle Walker or Zinchenko or whoever instead of him, and I'll just eat the salary. That's fine. And then finally, both of the West Ham guys come in next. And they're going to cross the ball a lot against Crystal Palace for sure. Cresswell does have the set pieces, but these guys project almost identically, so Kufal actually is a bit of a better value for me. So, I think that's going to do it. The optimal way to go here is just stacking up City, and like I said, 6 or 7 City guys, absolutely not out of the question. But keep in mind that in GPPs, everybody's going to be on City. There's a couple ways you could look at that. One way you could look at that is, maybe only taking 2 or 3 City pieces and then finding some high upside plays from somewhere else. Like you might get Mikel Antonio from West Ham at very low ownership because he's overpriced and not many people are going to want to pay up for him. So that's one way to think. Another way to think is there's just so many options from City that you could just multi-enter with all of your lineups, or nearly all of them, just rotating City in different ways with a piece here or there from other games, just to get the best combination of City, because they are just far and away in the best spot here for DFS. Although Leeds, I think, is a sneaky spot as well. And then West Ham, I think, will be pretty dominant I just think that they, at least on paper, could struggle to score against Crystal Palace. All right, guys, that is going to do it. Thanks for stopping by and watching. Hey, if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel. Gonna have a lot of useful stuff coming out, more previews, stuff about soccer cards as well. So if you're into any of that, pretty much all things soccer, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.